Call to order. What is the pleasure of Congressman Belaro?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we defer the dispense with the calling of the roll call, Mr. Chairman, and in view of the I also move, Mr. Chairman, that we defer the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, Your Honor.
Okay. Any second? Then it has been moved and seconded that the reading or the roll call be dispensed with. The same is hereby approved, and the reading of the minutes of the previous meeting is also hereby dispensed with, but the same is hereby approved. So anyway, good morning, everyone. Let me thank you for your attendance in today's meeting. This is not actually a hearing. Let me clarify that. And there will be no voting anymore. This meeting was really meant to craft the articles of impeachment, and of course, I don't know if Congressman Roque is coming over. Most likely not. Baka he will. So anyway, in his absence, I'd like to thank him for helping this committee. In fact, he did prepare an articles of impeachment that we ought to discuss today, if not for these recent developments that had made things easy or easier for the Committee on Justice. The directive of the plenary to us, which overturned our report, is that 137 members of the House of Representatives in plenary voted to impeach the chairman of the Comelec. And so we were tasked to prepare the articles of impeachment and forthwith file the same before the Senate Impeachment Court. But as luck would have it for us, I don't know what really happened, but there was a letter of resignation filed, and this was post dated to December 31, and the president accepted it as of yesterday. So and it is already effective. So this is you know, some sort of a good news for us in the Committee on Justice, and likewise perhaps in the Senate, so they need not worry about us crafting the articles of impeachment, and for Senate to hasten the formulation of their or adoption of their rules and their schedules. No? So anyway, before we further proceed, may I request the COMSEC to please acknowledge the members present and the resource persons and guests invited for today's hearing or meeting. For now, later I will give justice to everyone by giving you 1 or 2 minutes to express your thoughts on this, so that you know, this will not come out to be just a anticlimactic thing. You know, we'll allow everyone to speak anyway. This is a meeting, and we will recognize those who came over to participate in today's meeting. So please, COMSEC.
Yes, good morning. We'd like to acknowledge the presence of our members. Honorable Reynaldo Omales, our chairman. Honorable Rodolfo wala. Honorable Harry Roque, Honorable Gwendolyn Garcia, Honorable Rodante Marcoleta, Honorable Eugene Michael De Vera, Honorable Romeo Acop, Honorable Salvador Belaro Jr., Honorable Jerry Treñas.
Did we miss anyone? Okay na, no? What about yung resource persons?
We have as resource persons and guest lawyers, Mr. Norman Aiko Cho, his lawyer, Attorney Aiko Cho. Dave Sarmiento, Attorney Steffi Banaag from the Luzon Development Bank. Attorney Jean Agdon, also from Luzon Development Bank. Attorney Rudy Fernandez, also from Luzon Development Bank. Attorney Thea Dait Lavoina from the RCBC. Mr. Gil Beneventura from the President of RCBC. Attorney Christian Diaz, lawyer, counsel for the Chairman Bautista. Attorney Carlos Luis Tagarda, also counsel for the Chairman, Comelec Chairman Bautista. Mr. Arnel Alhambra, Senior Vice President of HSBC. Mr. Gerardo Oson Jr., Senior Vice President of the Luzon Development Bank. Mr. Nelson Benotapa, Luzon Development Bank. Ms. Luningning Bilen, also from Luzon Development Bank. Mr. Alejandro Navarro, or Attorney Alejandro Navarro, from RCBC. Attorney Aristarche Lanak Luna, also from RCBC. Mr. Balder
Bridges?
Bringas. Attorney, is a lawyer. Attorney Bringas, and then also Attorney Frances Lim from Luzon Development Bank. Attorney Jacinto Paras, complainant, former congressman. Attorney Manuelito Luna, also counsel for the complainants. Attorney Ferdinand Topacio, also complainant. And Attorney Eduardo also from the complainant, also si Attorney Kapunan. Attorney Lorna Kapunan. And Miss Patricia Bautista. And also Congressman Luis Jose Angel Campos Jr. Thank you po.
Thank you, Comsec. So, as I was saying, matters have brought us to where we are now. We would have finished this outright upon our presentation of the report, but of course, the aggressiveness of the endorsers, namely, of course, Deputy Speaker Gwen and Congressman Harry and Congressman Bambol, ano, kasama, no? Had made 134 others. 134 others to override the report that the committee had submitted and reported to plenary. And likewise, because of my good friend Congressman Dante Marcoleta, who has called my attention, even if I recognize him, but I think this time around you will be on top of my list on the matter of time that we will allot to the members. Of course, Jerry, at that time I had to call. He was already in Iloilo and he wanted to come back, but I told him wag na lang muna kasi sayang. And so are many other members who called me last night and until this morning asking me what instructions or what they should do, and I told them perhaps you know, this meeting will be anticlimactic after the acceptance of the resignation which was made effective by the President as of yesterday, I think about 2:30. Then came, let me just for the record inform the body that I am in receipt of a letter from the law firm of Diaz del Rosario and Associates, counsel for the respondent, together with a letter from a copy of the letter from the executive secretary addressed to Chairman Andres Bautista, informing of the acceptance of the resignation effective immediately. And in fact, I received a call from no less than the executive secretary at 12:04 in the morning. Kagabi yun. To inform me about these things. So, sabi ko nga, as I always say, all is well that ends well. It has ended well for the House of Representatives and also for the Senate, because this will really relieve us of the many things that we ought to do now that we had been directed by the plenary to already craft the articles of impeachment for direct filing to Senate. And of course, as I mentioned, thank you, Harry, for accommodating the request of the chair for you to prepare the draft articles that we should have or we would have discussed today. And he did it in record time. Kailan ba yun? Last day namin at about 6 or 7 in the evening. Na-prepare na niya. Maraming salamat. Of course, I'd like to thank, of course, the President for his swift and decisive action in accepting the resignation. Kahapon na-interview po ako sa ANC. Sabi ko nga, of course, the acceptance of the resignation was still not there. But I told them that we had to do this because we want to announce to the whole world, we want to warn everyone that when you deal with Congress, especially the Committee on Justice and especially on impeachment, you have to deal with us straightforwardly, so that because we will apply the full force of the mandate of the Constitution to the House of Representatives and to this Committee on Justice in whatever matters that will come our way to put a closure to what we're doing. Kailangan po ito, sabi ko nga kahapon, either this will force the hand of the respondent himself to resign irrevocably and immediately, or at the very least the executive to act boldly and accept the resignation, and that is what happened. And so the Committee on Justice and the House of Representatives is so grateful and thankful to the executive for its decisive and bold action in accepting the resignation. And having said, having received these notices of from the council of chairman, and of course the chair would like, and the committee would like to take judicial notice of yesterday's events, where there was a press con where he openly announced that he has already been relieved of his duties, and he has surrendered this to the Comelec, and so there is nothing much to discuss. But then, before we put a closure to this, I guess this will be the time when we will allow everyone to say their piece, you know, on this particular case, at least to give justice to your presence in today's hearing, so that hindi naman tayo pumunta rito for nothing. So having said that, sabi ko nga, I will recognize Congressman Dante Marcoleta. Baka ako ho'y impeach nito eh. So, Manang Dante, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the historic chance of being able to speak ahead of all the members of this committee for the first time. And I thank the chairman for doing that. At least at the time when there is not much to be said. Because, as the chairman said already, it appears that everything has been mooted by the resignation tendered by the Comelec chairman and accepted by the president, except for certain formalities, Mr. Chairman, because the acceptance of the resignation as communicated to this office was through the law firm of Diaz de Rosario and Associates. I do not remember, Mr. Chair, that this law office submitted earlier a formal entry of appearance where the conformity of the chairman himself is there. And so, considering that this letter dated October 23, 2017 does not bear the conformity of the chairman himself, maybe we can ask any of the attorneys present whether or not they can state for the record only that this letter bears the full conformity of the chairman, Andres Bautista of the Comelec. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Yes, thank you. We will first recognize in response to the request of Congressman Marcoleta. Sino ba? I heard kanina Attorney Tagarda representing, nandiyan ba?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Your Honors. Good morning to the members of
can
this
you please
committee.
respond to the query of the Honorable Marcoleta?
Yes, Your Honor. As regards the query of the Honorable Congressman, Your Honor, may we be allowed to formally enter our appearance today, Your Honor? So, Attorney Luis Carlo Artagarda, Your Honor, respectfully appearing for the former chairman of the Commission on Elections, Andres Bautista, Your Honor. Together
And, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I am Attorney Christian Diaz, also representing the former chair.
And on your lawyer's oath, do you proclaim that this letter of yours bear the conformity of the respondent, Chairman Andy Bautista of Comelec.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Is that satisfactory to the Honorable Marcoleta?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Let me just recognize, of course, the presence also of my kababayan, Congressman or Vice Chairman Doy Lechon of the 1st District of Oriental Mindoro. Yes, Congressman Paras.
Firstly, Mr. Chairman, we are not aware of the contents of the letter. What we know is that the President has accepted his resignation, but as far as we are concerned, the resignation was dated December 31. So, when you say that the President has accepted, does it mean that Mr. Bautista has also accepted the immediate acceptance of the President? Meaning to say, did he formally inform through that letter this august body that he in fact already resigned immediately? Kasi po, sa Presidente lang po yung letter accepting eh. But for the record, December 31 pa yung kanyang resignation. So, for the record lang po, na maano natin kung talaga bang nag-accept din siya sa immediate acceptance of the President of his resignation.
Thank you, Jing. In fact, that is what I mentioned earlier, that we take judicial notice of yesterday's press con of no less than Chairman Bautista when he declared that he is deemed resigned, and he is already evacuating his post.
Mr. Chair.
Congressman Roque.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is a precedent, a judicial precedent for what Chairman had just done yesterday, and that is the case of former President Estrada. When he left the palace, the Supreme Court ruled that he in effect performed constructive resignation. I think although my concern, like the concern of former Congressman Paras, was whether or not he had in fact resigned immediately, when I saw the same press conference alluded to by the chairman, I said, well, this is constructive resignation. He may have wanted to resign on December 31, but when the President accepted the resignation effective immediately, his pronouncement that he was vacating his post, the fact that he also announced he was no longer attending the imbank, and that the imbank would in turn elect an acting chair, are acts indicating that he has, for all intents and purposes, resigned immediately. So it is covered by the doctrine of constructive resignation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just
manifestation is well noted.
may I just probably, Mr. Chairman, the question is, when is the effectivity date of the resignation of the former chairman, so that we would know the the date wherein he really relinquished his appointment as the chairman of the Commission on Elections.
The date as contained in this letter, and if I may just read it for the records, this is a letter from Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea to Andres Bautista, Chairman Comelec, dated 23 October 2017. That was yesterday. And if I may just quote the pertinent portions. We refer to your letter tendering your resignation as chairman of the Commission on Election. Upon the instruction of President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, I wish to inform you that your resignation is hereby accepted, effective immediately. Best regards, very truly yours, etc. So this is the reckoning date. And I think this was received at 2:30 in the afternoon yesterday, after which was the press conference of former Chairman Bautista.
So it would be correct to say that the effective date would be October 23, 2017, Mr.
That's
Chairman,
correct. That's
at the
correct.
closing hours of the same date.
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, is that on this point? On the same point? Kasi I think matter is already settled. So, do we need to further discuss this?
Clarification only, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
For the complainants, what we are apprehensive about is the interregnum. Because the date that Mr. Bautista submitted his letter of resignation, post-dated December 31, was earlier than October 23. So there is an interregnum because as of yesterday, based on what the chair has said, he has accepted in a press con what the president has done with this letter, which is to accept it immediately. So are we certain that the date of effectivity is really October 23, or it should retroact to the date that he submitted this letter to Malacanang? This is important because there are legal implications which may crop up later, which may prejudice him or may cause some issues, especially on succession and vacancy.
Okay, we now recognize Congressman Doy Lechon.
I think with respect to the query of the good counsel, number one, we have to take judicial notice, as the chairman said, that the press con as well as the news yesterday was very much clarified in the sense that upon the acceptance of the president, and so with the knowledge of the acceptance also by Chairman Bautista, it rendered all matters settled as of yesterday, meaning the effectivity of the resignation would be yesterday, not on the day the letter was submitted, because the act or the manifestation or the manifest act of relinquishing the position was yesterday. And second, it is very clear in the letter, as attached in the letter of the lawyer for the former chairman, that the letter as signed by Executive Secretary Salvador Mijaldea very clearly states that the resignation is effective immediately, meaning as of the date of the letter, when the letter was signed by no less than the Executive Secretary for and in behalf of the President. So I think it's very clear right now. Of course, also with the case as mentioned by Congressman Harry Roque, the manifestation before, during, and after as initiated in the Estrada Doctrine with respect to the relinquishment of the position of the President during the time of the impeachment against him was made. When he left Malacanang, that's a very clear actuation that he was leaving. In the same vein, when the chairman announced yesterday, he was performing positions or functions prior to that one. But when he received the letter of the secretary for in behalf of the president, he manifested a clear intention of leaving the office of the Comelec. So I think that would, but be that as it may, well, the counsel of the former chairman is around. Maybe it's definitely moot and academic right now. As the chairman said, it's actually very settled right now. But then may we request also from you a very categorical and definitive statement on the part of the chairman. First and foremost, we just accepted you under oath that you're representing the former chairman, even without the conformity signature of the former chairman. Now, may we request from you to submit a letter with the conformity of the chair, number one, acknowledging your representation, and second, just to clear the air, state also the effective date when he left the position of the chairmanship of Comelec. May we request from you? What's your name, by the way?
My name is Attorney Christian Diaz, Your Honor.
Yeah. Well, of course, with the permission of the chair, it's my request that apart from this letter of informing the committee, may we request also from you another pleading from you, submitting with the conformity of the chairman your appearance herein, and so with the statement when was the actual date when he left Comelec, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Please comply.
Yes, Mr. Chair. We will comply with the directive, but I think it is sufficient enough that under oath we've already stated that we are entering our appearance for and on behalf of the former chair.
I would like to understand that, attorney, but then, Panero, but that is very clear that there is an opposing statement coming from the complainant. Just
Yes,
a matter of compliance. I would like to agree with you that you're under oath, but then just for the record, after all, we will be reverting back to the question of Congressman Marcoleta that you don't have any conformity signature of the chairman. So just to clear the air, you submit the conformity. So with the definitive statement, when was the date that he left Comelec? And I think that's very simple pleading that you can file within the day. I think you have to do it within the day, of course, with the permission of the chairman. It's my request that the letter be submitted today, anytime today, before the committee, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr.
Thank
Chairman, we will abide and we will confirm.
We, at the close of business hour today, of course, we are,
Up to 7 p.m.
up to 7 p.m. kami dito sa Congress.
We will comply.
Okay, so I think this matter is now all very clear, and again, there was an offer, there was an acceptance effective immediately, so there is now a meeting of the minds between the offeror and the appointing authority who accepted the resignation. So this meeting of the minds rendered this issue finished. Okay, so is that a different issue o babalik na naman tayo? Can we dispense with this and move to another point?
Mr. Chairman, if I may indulge the patience of the August Committee, just to, speaking for myself, while we appreciate the safeguards being imposed by Honorable Yachon, I just want to make it of record that I know these lawyers, I have worked with them, they are ethical and totally reputable, and this representation has no reason to doubt any of their statements, especially when they refer to Mr. Bautista as the former Comelec chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, also on this point, Attorney Kapunan, on another matter. Okay, so, ano ba? So again, sige, so, may we now go the rounds? Any comment from the members before we go to our invited resource persons? There being none, we now recognize Attorney Kapunan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I speak on behalf of my client, Patricia Bautista, and all of those who really seek justice. I'd like to say thank you. It was an uphill climb, but we had never doubted the integrity of this committee, nor of the plenary, nor of the institution itself. That's what the Constitution is all about, a system of checks and balances. Be that as it may we state for the record, and as lawyers, we would like to make a proffer of evidence. We would like to make a proffer in the sense that although Patricia Bautista, the complainant in pending cases, Your Honor, and apparently on whom the articles of impeachment based its two articles of impeachment, Your Honor, mentioning certain bank accounts, our proffer is as follows. Had the articles of incorporation articles of impeachment proceeded, and had this been given substance through a full-blown impeachment proceedings in the House, complainant Patricia Bautista would have been able to prove, number one, that all the bank accounts stated therein are not manufactured, that they are genuine, and in fact, the evidence has been submitted to the NBI. Number two, there are allegations there as to commissions paid to a Divina Law Firm and a connection to Smartmatic. Had this proceedings proceeded, we would have been able to prove without doubt and based on documentary evidence that there is basis in substance for the allegations of plunder against Smartmatic, Divina Law, and Andy Bautista in conspiracy with each other. The bank accounts, Your Honor, unfortunately, we were not able to show here because of lack of opportunity. But under oath, Patricia is willing to state under oath. And as part of our proffer, that had these bank accounts had we been given to show this, given the opportunity to prove the reliability of the bank accounts, there would be no charge. There would be no doubt that Mr. Andy Bautista would have been impeached as a Comelec chairman, Your Honor. Right now, we are very pleased and we thank the kind committee. Right now, we have leveled the playing field. He now cannot hide under the immunity of his office. He will be sued at the proper time based on the evidence and the report of the NBI as private citizen Andy Bautista. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Attorney Gapunan. Actually, that is now the province of this committee. Actually, we call this hearing not for the purpose of conducting the other processes in the impeachment proceeding, like what do you call this, the sufficiency in substance, etc., but merely to substantiate all of the allegations. And quite frankly, we were expecting that this meeting will now be able to collate all of this evidence, including affidavits, but these were overtaken by events. But the committee would most gladly admit all of the documents that you would submit to this committee for the record, and so that we will have a complete set of records also in our files and in our records, that the committee can refer back to later on, whether not necessarily by this committee acting as an impeachment body, but actually for other purposes that this may serve. Of course, the Committee on Justice has continuing oversight over Comelec and the House of Representatives have continuing oversight powers over all branches of government. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Please submit all of this in writing, and we will duly note it as part of the records of this proceeding.
Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me. May I just? I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank
if I
you,
may.
Mr. Chairman. Excuse me.
Yes.
Can I just?
Still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the same matter, Your Honor, may we request that our proffer of evidence remain on record. Number two, as to our...
In writing,
In writing,
na, because
yes, Your Honor.
we do not want to belabor.
And number two, Mr. Chairman, we appreciate that this is no longer an impeachment court, but the primary function really of this House is to conduct investigation in aid of legislation.
No, this is
different. I'm of the House, Your Honor, of the House. So the documents, albeit no long rendered moot and academic in the House, sitting as an impeachment tribunal, impeachment body, will still be useful in aid of legislation, because as will be seen from the documents, perhaps it is ripe for us to review, number one, the bank secrecy laws and our anti-money laundering laws and our laws on plunder, and how easily this can be escaped by people minded to do so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Congressman Marcolecta.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I would respectfully ask whether or not this committee, having just written finish to the proceedings, based on your own pronouncement that the events have rendered our proceedings moot and academic, I would not know how the proffer of evidence can still be admitted. Because in regular courts, Mr. Chair, the proffer of evidence are legal and valid because they can be taken at later point in the proceedings in the court. It can always be open. But in our case, I would respectfully ask whether our committee is competent to accept any document relative to a closed proceedings, as we did already.
Matter of semantics lang, probably not proffer of evidence, but basically records that would have been part of these proceedings that the committee would like to admit without having to argue about it, no? So
no, but the very fact of admitting the evidence, Mr. Chair, we might be questioned later on because we just closed our proceedings.
No, we have not closed.
It has
we have
been,
not closed.
No, in
we are just
relation, I
discussing.
mean, in relation to the actions that will be taken in connection with our pronouncement that this case has been rendered moot and academic by the formal resignation already accepted by the President.
That's why I'm saying that this is not proffer of evidence, but just submission of records that may guide the House of Representatives in future actions relating to matters that have a bearing on future legislations.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Congressman Vilaro first.
Mr. Chairman, this representation just has a comment regarding the propriety of the allowance of the submission of a proffer of evidence at this point in the proceedings. I believe that the rules of court are supplementary in this case, but with respect to proffer of evidence, I think it is clear in the rules of court that it requires leave of court, which means it has to be accepted by the court whether the proffer is proper or not. In this case, Your Honor, I think it's very improper. Firstly, as discussed by Congressman Marcoleta and Congressman Doyle Lechon, we have just closed the proceedings. Number two, I think there is an evidentiary importance here because these matters, it should be, even if it's just for the purpose of entertainment or any other purpose, would become part of the records. It should become a reference. And instead of furthering or in aid of legislation might be construed otherwise. So I think it would be very dangerous at this point in time to entertain even when the proceedings has become functus officio. So with all these things, therefore, Mr. Chairman, may I move that we terminate the proceedings subject to three qualifications. First is that the submission of the conformity as requested to the lawyer of the former chairman. Second, the ascertainment of the date of effectivity of the resignation, which was supposed to be yesterday, and of course, subject to the general discretion of Congress to revert this decision to terminate the proceedings at this point in time, so that we don't waste on further matters, and which I agree we could concentrate on other matters which are of national interest. Thank you,
Chair.
Mr. Chairman. If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman.
Object muna. Well,
is that a motion that you made? And there is a second.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
There is an objection from a member, Congressman Roque.
Well, Mr. Chair, number one, my objection is premised on the fact that we have already impeached Mr. Bautista. So for all intents and purposes, the function of the Committee on Justice for purposes of impeachment had been concluded. So there is nothing to close. The only act that has to be filed in the Senate is the articles of impeachment. But lest we give the impression that Andy Bautista was not impeached, he was. And that was done for the House by plenary. So my position, Mr. Chair, is there is nothing to close. If it has become the term used by Congressman Belaro is functus officius. What made it functus officius is the vote of plenary, not any act of this committee, because the committee in fact voted to dismiss on the basis of insufficiency of form. So it was the decision of the plenary that rendered all matters relating to the impeachment of Chairman Bautista as functus officius, because our rules provide that once superseded, once the report of the Committee on Justice on Impeachment is overridden by plenary, that results in an impeachment. So he has been impeached. Now,
thank you
the only matter that we're discussing today is finalization of the articles of impeachment, no? And that is why I think the consensus so far is that there is no need to file the articles of impeachment because there is now a vacancy in the office of chairman of the Comelec. But we are not receiving, we are not evidence here, we are not determining anything as a Committee on Justice. We are here only supposedly to finalize our articles of impeachment, and because we wanted to finalize our articles of impeachment, we invited resource persons. And that is why I think for our purposes today, since we invited resource persons and because we have been superseded by events, perhaps by way of a compromise, we could just submit, we could just ask all the resource persons to submit whatever it is that they would have shared with us had we proceeded with our hearing for the purpose of finalizing the articles of impeachment.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I would just like to clarify.
Thank you for that. Can we hold our horses? Kong Doy before...
just for clarification, I mean, nearing the point of order, but then there is more or less in the air that, again, for the second time, the committee more or less has a consensus, and there is, in fact, the motion, that's actually the parliamentary status. I would like to ask, inquire with Congressman Roque, then what's your pleasure if you're stating here that you would like to finalize as per mandate of the plenary that we have to finalize the articles of impeachment? So what will happen next?
Well, let me clarify. That is not my position. My position is we do not have to proceed with finalizing the articles of impeachment because there's already a vacancy. But what I'm saying is we are not proceeding as we had planned because we were overtaken by events, and that is why my suggestion is,
I perfectly understand, Mr. Chair.
is whatever materials they want to submit, because we invited them anyway, let's just accept them. But really, it's just a matter of accepting because we cannot do anything with it. Because in the first place, the decision to impeach had been made by plenary and not by this committee.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I perfectly understand the position of Congressman Roque, but now the Parliament's status is very clear that there is a motion for the termination of the complaint. So
before that, I'd like to recognize Congressman Akop. You wanted to say something earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of impeachment is to remove an official who cannot be removed by ordinary means, only by impeachment. But since we have already declared that there's a vacancy, therefore what's the use of all these proceedings? It has become moot and academic. And therefore, Mr. Chair, as far as this representation is concerned, I object to the proffer of evidence, simply because it's no longer necessary.
Thank you for that clarification. As I pointed out, when we called this meeting, this is not meant to be a hearing, because the directive of plenary for us is to craft the articles of impeachment. And this will not go through any voting anymore on substance, on grounds, and on probable cause, because In fact, let me correct whatever statement I heard, that we are still in that process of impeaching because Chairman Bautista has been impeached by the override of the report by 137 members who voted in plenary. So our task now is just to gather, collate evidence on the matter of the directive of the plenary for us to craft the articles of impeachment. And we want to be liberal. That's why we are giving chance for everyone to speak up, because we do, of course, we do want to give justice to their coming over and assist the committee in the crafting of the articles of impeachment, because I cannot imagine ourselves, after having dismissed on insufficiency of form of the complaint, to go to Senate using that same complaint without the benefit of any some sort of preliminary investigation. And that is why I requested Congressman Harry Roque to prepare it for us to be used as part of our working document in finalizing it. No? So I don't think it will really matter much if we accept this out of liberality. After all, this will only form part of the records of this proceeding.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sandali lang po. Actually, this is an issue among the members, and I think I'd like to give the members that opportunity to further discuss this, so that we will put a closure on this.
Mr. Chair, it is true that the plenary overturned the committee report, and that is why the former Comelec chairman was impeached. But when the plenary did that, it did not have the knowledge that eventually that resignation of the former Comelec chairman will be accepted by the president. The very fact that it was accepted, effective immediately by the president, that already terminated our proceedings. And so, while we can thank the good Congressman Roque for working very hard to produce an articles of impeachment, I think he can understand very well that it is no longer needed, because the position was rendered vacant already. And even our invited guests and resource persons can very well understand that this is no longer needed. It is a useless exercise, Mr. Chair, to accept any documents that people may want to contribute to this, because we don't find anything useful in the exercise, Mr. Chair. We might be suspected of collecting information no longer relevant, because we can no longer substantiate the articles of impeachment, while we can thank our colleague for having done an article of impeachment. But this is no longer necessary.
Your Honor, we need to report back to plenary.
Yes.
So my task is not yet over, because I need to report back to plenary what the committee has done on the matter of crafting that impeachment articles.
Mr. Chair, what we can report back to the plenary, Mr. Chair, is we were overtaken by events, and
yes.
and the public knows it very well too, that the Comelec chairman had resigned yesterday, and the committee took
that's why
cognizance of that fact.
That's why this proceeding or this meeting is not yet functus officio. Yun yung sinasabi ko. And there may be matters that we can still consider because we have not closed the proceeding as yet. Because this closure will come after we make a report to the plenary again. Yun po yung trabaho po natin eh. Hindi naman na automatic yung kasi ang atas po sa atin ay gumawa ng articles and we need to report back to the plenary. Hindi na po namin tinuloy yung articles of impeachment, pero ito po yung nakalap namin for the records of the House of Representatives, no longer of this Committee on Justice.
But Mr. Chair, that is precisely what we were objecting. The matter of collecting other documents necessary to reinforce the articles of impeachment.
So the parliamentary status of this is that there is a motion, dapat positive di ba? What is the motion again? Will you please restate the motion, Bong? Kong Bong?
For the record, Mr. Chairman, the motion is to not close. Just for the record, it's to terminate. The wording is, I move that we terminate the proceedings in relation to the impeachment against Comelec Chairman Bautista, subject to 3 qualifications. The first being showing of the conformity of Chairman Bautista. Second is the ascertainment that indeed the resignation took effect yesterday. And third, subject to the general discretion of Congress to overturn the outcome of these proceedings. And that includes already the outcome of the plenary.
Ano yan? Yan yung pangatlo.
Subject to the general discretion of Congress and the committee. To rule otherwise, to revert, to rule otherwise, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and you seconded there is an objection.
Before we vote, divide the House, may I know from the committee secretary if we have a quorum to act on the motion?
Yes, Your Honor. We have 11 members present.
Okay.
Including
Well,
ex-officio.
Mr. Chair, before we proceed, I'd like to appeal to my good friend, Congressman Belaron. I don't really want to act on the motion because we're acting on a motion pursuant to a statement made by Attorney Kapunan, which is the proffer of evidence. There is nothing that we have said as members of Congress that we want to accept a proffer of evidence. So, all that I want to be very clear is since we have been overtaken by events, and prior to the events, we invited resource persons, and since we're no longer proceeding with finalizing the articles of impeachment, for all resource persons invited to submit whatever it is that they want to submit to this committee, full stop. Maybe the confusing point was the proffer of evidence. In the first place, we're not a court that could act on a proffer of evidence. But since we invited, we have resource persons, I think it's just to allow them to submit whatever it is that they want to submit for whatever purpose it may serve.
Mr. Chair.
Because I reiterate that at this point, we should not be acting on motions because we're only supposed to be drafting the articles of impeachment.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyway, but there is a motion that we will have to resolve.
Can I ask, Mr. Chair, Attorney Vilaro to withdraw the motion?
Session suspended for 10 minutes.
Report natin kung magkano ba tayo kasi sila may jurisdiction na
any rate, in any event, the treatment of these documents will be just as they are, meaning to say, without any legal significance as of now, with due reference to the legal significance that would normally attach to it, if this were a regular court proceedings, meaning to say, the rules the rules of court on evidence would apply, but with the specific qualification that this would be treated as just as they are, without requiring any obligation on the part of Congress to act on it or to review it, but they are just there at the office of Congressman Roque. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I move that I am withdrawing my motion to pave way for a more proper motion, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Thank you for that. At this juncture, we'd like to recognize Congressman Roque.
Yes, I confirm that because we drafted the articles of impeachment, all relevant documents are in my possession. What I will do with the documents, because I do not have really space in my office, is just to turn it over to the committee. All the documents that I have, just to turn it over because I have no space for storage.
So what is the pleasure?
It doesn't even have to be a motion. It's just a manifestation that I will turn over the documents that I have in my possession to the committee secretary.
To form part of the records of this
and for whatever purposes. No?
Mr. Chairman.
So anyway, before that, your motion that you withdraw carried with it some of the conditions. You wanted a submission of one, the letter with the conformity of the respondent himself, Chairman Bautista. Second is that the effectivity date is ascertained and clear from the letter that you will submit to us. And there is another one.
The general power of Congress to rule otherwise.
Anyway, that is a plenary power that we need not even discuss. So there are two, plus of course your manifestation that you already have these records in your custody that you would like to turn over to the committee. I guess these are all well taken, and so at this juncture we're ready.
Mr. Chairman. If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sandali lang, we'll just try to resolve this. Anyway, we need all of these documents as we agreed by close of office hours today. No, so siguro to give us time to be able to comply with this requirement of submission within the close of office hours, and since you need to go back to your offices to obtain the necessary conformity of your client, then what is the pleasure of...
Well, Mr. Chair, I think the consensus of the committee as well as all members, definitely because the case has been rendered moot and academic by the acceptance of the letter of resignation by the President. But there are actually certain issues here to be thrashed out still. Number one, the issue, well, of course, the documents needed to be submitted herein. Number two, I think there is a concern of Congressman Marcoleta, considering that there was no conformity of the client. It's very clear that the motion or any pleading submitted before this committee without the conformity of the client does not actually bind the client. And I think we have to be cautious about it. And number three, there is a question, in fact, as to the determination of the date of resignation. I think, well, of course, we are in consensus that he resigned, but then just for the clarity of records, I mean, the lawyers for the former chairman, I would like to reiterate to submit within the day as as said by the chairman. But in the meantime, I think if amenable to all members, we have to adjourn first because there are no other matters to hear.
Second.
I think with the submission of that one, the proceedings of this committee would be definitely moot and academic after the submission of the required documents, Mr. Chair.
Okay, there is a motion. The favorite motion has been made, and there is no objection. This meeting is hereby adjourned. Yeah.